This is Creek with At the Table Podcast. Here at the Table Podcast, our goal is to break down biblical topics, make Scripture easy to understand, and to glorify God and His Word. We pray this content challenges, edifies, and blesses you. So, without further ado, let's check out what's at the table.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to... dude.
You remember that Tide commercial? When that guy's like getting an interview?
What? Ever. Back to my introduction. Plug whatever that was later. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of At the Table Podcast. I'm here, as always, with one of my wonderful co-hosts, Creek, and the other one who likes to play the interrupting cow.
Good morning.
John?
Man.
Moo!
Dude, you went into full beller into that microphone, man.
It did echo. I spiked it.
I did more than that. It went out my left ear from my right, dude. Crazy.
That's because it's hollow in there.
Dang.
That's pretty hardcore.
How you doing, John? In all seriousness.
I was doing okay. Creek's been fun to see today, but can't say the same for the Neff over there. I'm just joking. No, it's been really good, actually. I fell asleep fairly early last night, but I don't feel like I slept at all. I feel like my sleep was really, really light.
Yeah, I know mine was. It was pretty, just even saying the word sleep almost brought on a yawn.
And it's been hotter than a $2 High Point pistol outside.
It's really taking it out of me. I'm telling you, I've been working on my wife's car. I'm attempting the hardest repair that I've ever done. I am pulling an AC compressor and everything in between the top and the bottom of that so that I can pull it out. And I'm telling you, it is
5-minute fix.
Dude, I've pulled a motor mount. I don't know if either of you have ever pulled a motor mount on a vehicle, but
I don't know why that's so complicated.
Oh, good. So you guys are volunteering. Okay, I'll see you guys after podcasting. I need some help.
So the audience can't see this, but I kind of look like the little Debbie picture with a beard.
Or Wendy's.
Golly.
But it's I had my wife braid my hair because it's getting so freaking hot.
I thought maybe Wendy's.
Well, at work, man, it's literally like a blanket that covers the back of my neck and keeps any air from getting to my head. So
Just cut it.
A couple of days.
Oh, that's dope. Leave it. I like the braids.
What do you mean, cut it?
The braids are dope, man.
Don't you ever blaspheme in this podcast
Dude,
again?
don't cut your hair. It's the source of your strength.
Did you lose yours?
Yeah, for real. You lost your strength.
Man, it does feel like your mojo.
And my integrity.
Man.
They cut it off me. Delilah.
That's a perfect crickets button right there.
Okay, Creek, you got anything new to share?
Well, we did our T-shirt giveaway, so we're going to do the announcements for that. First winner of the T-shirt, Derek Campela.
Yes, Mr. Derek. Yes.
Are you positive you're saying his name right?
Yes.
I don't even
Derek Campela.
There you go.
Derek Campela.
Second winner is Kevin Swisher.
My man, Big K. Yeah. Yes, sir. Come on.
Yeah.
Swisher Sweet.
So
Thank
you guys have, golly, bro. You guys have 3 hours after this podcast publishes to message us, or you give up your right to have the T-shirt.
Gosh, dog.
I'm just kidding.
Hey, congratulations to our two winners and to everyone who
reach out.
participated and liked and shared our stuff and helped to get our content out.
Yeah. Yes.
Grazie.
Yes,
we
thank
appreciate you.
We love you so much.
Yes. We appreciate you supporting the content.
We love you.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it there.
Well, I just got to say this, too. I'm sure you guys agree. I look forward to this. You know, I really do. They say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
This is a good deal.
Yeah.
No, I do. That's what I was actually, I don't even remember who I was telling last night.
It's a lot funner than making barbecue.
It is.
Funner.
Yeah. I've done barbecue for myself, and this is a lot funner. Although eating is a close second.
Yep.
But one thing I will say is, like, it is fun and it is so satisfying, but
sobering.
there is so much to it on so many different sides. This podcasting dream that we're living it's wonderful, and I thank God for it. But also, like, not even just talking about like the expense side of things, just the time and energy put in. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Even for 3 people, divided amongst 3 people, it's a lot. It's demanding, but I couldn't think of 2 other people in the world I'd rather do it with.
Well, and in the 3 people, it's divided among. I mean, Creek and Morgan have been shouldering the load lately. You guys are doing awesome.
Yeah, I got the YouTube up. Dude, if you're listening to this on any other platform, because we are in any place that fine podcasts are sold, but if you're listening to this on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, go to our YouTube and give it a like and a subscribe.
Please.
Share. Help get it out there. We're uploading past episodes. We are working on video podcasting. Me and the wife are working on the TikTok stuff. Praise God. It's just... we're seeing some real growth and some real progress, and I couldn't be more excited for it.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
Thank you, Morgan, if you're listening to this.
Have it all up. Yeah, like you said, go check it out because, here pretty quick we'll get new stuff. We're going to do videos, so, yeah.
Right on.
All right, well, after a brief little intro and some banter and some weird random noises from John.
For real, like the whole time.
He might be having a stroke. We don't know. But pray for him because he's the one who is expected to lead us on this journey and to tell us what is at the table.
I feel good. Na, 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 na. Oh. What is at the table today?
I'm sorry. I just love it when you get judgmental views from Creek. He's over here looking down his nose at you.
I kind of like it too. It feeds something in me, to be real.
I think it's the child in you.
Yeah.
That's most of you, if we're being honest.
I feel like Dash, and he's Mr. Incredible. When he gets in trouble they got you on camera and you still got away with it? You must have been booking. How fast do you think you were going?
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry.
There's your Disney. Oh, that's Pixar. It's not Disney.
Well,
are they not owned by
same
Disney?
thing. Yeah.
I guess they are now, but I don't think they were when it was made.
Anywho, what is at the table today is yet another episode of The Snake Crusher. Yeah.
He's learned how to use one button, folks.
You guys have put the soundboard 6 feet away from me.
That's because you're an F. You ought to be able to reach that, dog.
Scoot your chair closer.
Low-key just joking. He is freakishly tall, though. So is Trey. Anyway. So, The Snake Crusher. So in the last episode we covered, in The Snake Crusher, if you're tuning in for the first time, this is a series geared towards sort of going through the Old Testament in a very specific lens, trying to flesh out, things that would pop, if you were reading this narrative in expectation or living in the time of this narrative, and you're waiting for the promised snake crusher. And what is it, Genesis 3:15? Is that right?
Yes.
And that's that this snake crusher, this Messiah, this anointed one, is going to come and crush evil. But so we're scoping him out, and these candidates that are produced through David's line, or these men through David's line, are the people that we're specifically looking at, because David has been told to be fathering the Messiah, or the Messiah will come from David. So in the last episode, we talked about a queen that was ruling in Judah, which is really, really weird.
The Jezebel of Judah.
Exactly.
Color.
Yeah. And that's a very fair thing to say, because she is in relation to the northern kingdom. Atalia is, if I'm not mistaken, she is the granddaughter of Omri, which was the king in the northern kingdom after Ahab, almost just as bad as Ahab was. And so it's a tie into the northern house, and you may be thinking, like, what makes the northern kingdom of Israel so bad? Well, they've been apostate for generations of kings now. They're not loyal to Yahweh, and the very first king of the northern kingdom, after the split away from David, drove them into idolatry, and they've delved into it ever since. So in the last episode, we talked about Atalia's rule this queen kills all of the heirs to her knowledge of the throne and seizes control of the throne. Unbeknownst to her, one heir was saved, a young boy by the name of Joash. And I will point out, too, that at this point, we do have another name mentioned besides David prophetically from a prophet, and that's a King Josiah. And he's not been promised to be the Messiah per se, but he's been promised that he's going to come and he's gonna break down a lot of idolatry.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah,
Have
exactly.
hope. Yes.
So we're scoping the silver lining for him too in the clouds. But we're going to pick up in 2 Chronicles 23. We're going to read, I'm reading from the ESV. But in the 7th year, Jehoiada,
I was wondering how you were going to say that.
Jehoiada took courage and entered into a covenant with the commanders of hundreds, Azariah, the son of Jeroham, Ishmael, the son of Jehohanan, Azariah, the son of Obed, Matthiah, the son of Adiah, and Elishaphat, son of Zichri. And they went about Judah and gathered the Levites from all the cities of Judah and all of the heads of the fathers of the houses of Israel, and they came to Jerusalem. And all of the assembly made a covenant with the king in the house of God. So just kind of a pause. We've gone over the coronation thing a few times, and that's not been super popular lately with the kings that we've came across in the narratives. A lot of these kings don't end up anymore where we are told by the text explicitly, at least, that they're being anointed by a king getting anointed by a prophet or by a priest, which is one of the seals sort of God's approval that this is the legitimate heir. So, anyway, there's these Levites and, mighty men gathered in the house of God. They all come to this assembly. And Jehoiada said to them, "Behold the king's son, let him reign, as the Lord spoke concerning the sons of David." Quick pause. This, for the reader, this is important. What Judah's boast is over the northern kingdom is the only legitimate dynasty in God's people is David's dynasty.
Yeah.
There is no other legitimate dynasty. And so if Joash is not a son of David, he is not a legitimate king. So that's important. They give us that piece of information. So this Joash kid does come from his line. This is the thing you will do, Jehoiada says. Of you, priests and Levites who come off duty on the Sabbath, 1/3 will be gatekeepers, 1/3 at the king's house, and 1/3 at the gate of the foundation. All of the people will be in the courts of the house of the Lord. Let no one enter the house of the Lord except the priests and ministering Levites. They may enter, for they are holy, but all the people shall keep the charge of the Lord. I want to add one more piece. This is just me jumping in here. It seems like a lot of the time, at least to me, that it hasn't been like a righteous Levite priest protecting the purity of ritual systems, that God has placed forth. But a lot of the times that's sort of spearheaded by a prophet. A prophet comes along and says this or that. But it's funny because the 2 Chronicles 23, with the introduction of a new heir, it begins with a priest that has protected the Davidic line, right? He takes him into God's house where no one else can be and raises him up and takes care of him.
Well, it's all looking really good. You have a kid who, Atalia was trying to literally kill the Davidic line, but this priest saves the Davidic line. This child raises the child. They're defending the child. This kid is literally growing up in the temple. That's, that's crazy. That's looking really good, though.
Yeah.
Almost like a
king priest.
Samuel kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, dedicated to the Lord, raised in the temple.
Right.
I think you both bring up a good point. Maybe it doesn't bring to the mind a marriage of the two ideas, but they're coming into close contact with one another again. And that brings kind of a warm feeling about, you rises expectation, so to speak. So, he's protecting this and saying only the priests and ministering Levites can enter because they are holy, but all the people shall keep the charge or obey the charge of the Lord. The Levites will surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand. Look at the posture of the Levitic priesthood, protecting David's dynasty. And it's interesting, too, because they originally fled to David's dynasty for help, right? When Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, ruled the northern kingdom and he rose to power, he kicked the priests out, right? The legitimate form of Yahweh worship, he kicked them out. And then, David's descendants are essentially rolling out the red carpet saying, hey, come down here. This is where the temple is anyway. Come down and minister in the temple. And so Levi is kind of joined into Judah's kingdom. And now it's being reversed. He's doing the protecting. So each of them surround the king with their weapons in their hand, and whoever enters the house shall be put to death. Be with the king when he comes in and when he goes out. So they basically station bodyguards. The Levites and all Judah did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. They each brought his men who were to go off duty on the Sabbath with those that were to come on duty on the Sabbath, for Jehoiada the priest did not dismiss the divisions. And Jehoiada the priest gave to the captains the spears and the large and small shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of God. And he set all the people as a guard for the king, every man with his weapon in his hand, from the south side of the house to the north side of the house, all around the altar and the house. I may be spying something here that's not here. Feel free to tell me that. And Heiser, may his memory be blessed, covered this in a lot of detail. And I know he's not the only scholar that did, but in the Exodus, there's this theme of Yahweh's march from the south. How Yahweh comes up from the south, leading his people and his armies, and then they come into Canaan and oppose this. We remember juxtapositioned was Baal Zephon when they were at the Red Sea waters, the Lord of the North. So from south to north is kind of
basically the going up is Israel is always the going up.
Yeah,
and that's the place that you want to go to. Whereas going down is usually Egypt or Syria, and it's not good.
Not good. Yep. Don't go south, but from the south north. So that was just an interesting note. So they brought out the king's son, and they put a crown on him, and gave him the testimony, and proclaimed him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him, and they said, "Long live the king." And I will say too, for the Levitic priesthood, there's been a pretty rough track record with having good priests and good priest sons also being good priests.
Yeah.
Typically, the sons haven't been very awesome, but this doesn't seem to be that way. So we have a coronation, and Joash has been crowned, and Athaliah hears of it. So in verse 12, it says, when Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and praising the king, she went into the house of the Lord to the people.
Yeah.
And when she looked,
you don't belong here.
Right. And when she looked, there was the king standing by his pillar at the entrance, and the captains and trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and singers with musical instruments leading in the celebration. And Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason."
She's crying treason.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it has something else. But I think this is a good point. We've also kind of made a habit out of sort of fleshing out the snakes in the story too. She's a viper for sure. Here's this infiltrator from the northern kingdom. And what does she do? She's trying to wipe out David's line.
Yeah.
She's trying to kill any legitimate Davidic heir to the throne. And as soon as one seizes the throne that is rightfully his by the priesthood, that is rightfully supposed to designate him and approve him to that throne, what is she caught doing? She's opposing it.
Oh, yeah. I think that, too, and I don't want it to kick at the proverbial dead horse, but, I think that the imagery here is really significant because you have this Davidic lineage, and where should a good king be found? In the house of the Lord, right? And so it's almost that symbolic, the priests are doing what they're supposed to do. This king is being coronated in a way that is reminiscent of his fathers, of his good fathers that followed after Yahweh. He's being crowned literally in the temple, right, in the house of the Lord. And, you know, when this serpent comes, the outcome for her is it's what a serpent deserves.
When the army finds out that you're a girl.
When the army finds out that you're a girl, the penalty is death.
There's your other Disney reference for
Man, but straight up, after she cries treason, the priests come out with the captains of hundreds that are set over him, and have her forth of the ranges, and whosoever follows her, let him be slain with the sword. For the priest said, slay her not in the house of the Lord. Mm-hmm. So they lay hands on her, and when she has come to the entering of the horse gate by the king's house, they slew her there. And Jehoiada made a covenant between him and between all the people, between the king, that they should be the Lord's people.
Wow.
Then all of the people went out of the house of Baal, and they broke it down, and broke his altars and his images in pieces. And they slew Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. Also Jehoiada appointed the offices of the Lord, of the house of the Lord, by the hand of the priests, the Levites, whom David had distributed to the house of the Lord, to offer burnt offerings, as it is written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and singing, as it was ordained by David. That is pretty epic.
Yeah, that's epic.
Yeah, it shows a return. Nothing else.
Maybe they messed up in the prophecy. Maybe they meant Jehoiada. I don't know.
Right.
Well, it just seems to be like God's sovereign hand on his promise, right? That he said he promised David that, and not only that, he promised Solomon. He said, listen, if you will keep my covenant and my ways, you will never lack a descendant on the throne. All it takes is for one of these men from this promised line of David to follow after Yahweh and to do what's right. And he said, I'll back you. Your kingdom will be established. And that's what we've seen.
That's awesome.
And the chapter ends with kind of this cool note of Joash being like led almost in like parade style, you know, marching through the upper gate to the king's house and seating him on the royal throne. So the snake that's been occupying the throne that doesn't belong has been put to death. The funny thing is, it's like they say, the city was quiet after they heard that she had been put to death. It was like, you know, again, what's one of those notes of coronation?
Yeah.
You know,
The rim.
But in
what's
this,
getting devoted to destruction.
right. But in this case, it's not necessarily the king that has executed that judgment. But you got to remember, this kid is 7 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the priest.
But Jehoiada on his behalf does it. And it's cool to see such a tight-knit relationship again between the king and the priesthood.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the next chapter begins with Joash's reign. It says he was 7 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. Long period of time, especially in a kingdom that has been so unstable. But his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And that's something, pause, that you're going to know a lot in the Chronicles, is they're careful to point out the mother of the king and where the mother's from. Yeah. And just as a way to show, is this legitimate or is it not, right? And Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all of the days of Jehoiada the priest.
Huh? Why do you think it says that?
Time will tell.
Not all the days of his life? Okay, anyway. Maybe it was a typo.
That's funny, because the next thing that Jehoiada does maybe isn't as good. He gets for him 2 wives, and he has sons and daughters. And
it's not good, but it's better than 600.
Right. Maybe he meant well, because he's like, well, these are Hebrew wives. They're good. Let's get him 2 so we don't want no more.
Jacob had 2 wives.
Right.
It's better than 1,000 concubines.
Well,
yeah.
And I will say, you know, to me, it brings back all of the other stories we've gone through where guys have 2 wives. And I'm thinking,
a little bit of contention.
It just feels like something's about to go bad.
A little trouble in paradise.
It'd be hard to have 2 at the same time when you haven't been married yet.
Yeah.
And you're 7. But.
Well, he's probably not 7 when he got married. I mean, I'm sure the Chronicle is like not that he was 7 years old when he got married.
Hey,
we can ask him.
He's the king.
We can ask him when we go to heaven.
I just can't wait to be king.
Gosh, dog. So anyway, we have a king, and Jehoiada picks out his wives. That's at least a good thing. At least it's getting picked out by a righteous priest. We'll take that. It says, after this, Joash decided to restore the house of the Lord and gathered the priests and the Levites and said to them, go out to the cities of Judah and gather from all Israel money to repair the house of the Lord, your God, from year to year. See that you act quickly. But the Levites did not act quickly. So the king summoned Jehoiada the chief and said to them, why have you not required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem the tax levied by Moses, the servant of the Lord? So pause. He's reimposing the tax of Moses, right? And to me, that it's almost like the text is signaling for us a new beginning of sorts. For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken into the house of God and used all of the dedicated things of the house of the Lord for the Baals. So she has defiled these ritual instruments, or dedicated things, I guess. So the king commanded, dedicated things is what they're called, my apologies. So the king commanded, and they made a chest and set it outside the gate of the house of the Lord. And this is to collect that tax, and basically for everyone and all of Judah and Jerusalem is supposed to bring this tax. So they make this proclamation. All of the princes and the people rejoiced and brought their tax and dropped it into the chest until they had finished. And the text is saying again that there's a cheerful giving from the people of Judah ready to see this thing established. It kind of almost harkens you back to Solomon's reign too, where, the people are coming and giving generously and working hard or toiling to see the temple restored and things as it should be.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah. Well, we're not. There's
also
Solomon did that wasn't good.
Well, there's just, and I almost detect a hint of the same flavoring, like in this story here, right? I mean, how was that Temple of Solomon built?
Yeah, off the back.
Slave labor. Like, and that's the promise that God made to Israel. Like, dude, you do not want a king. Because if you have a king, he's going to enlist your sons, take your land, your daughters, he's going to tax you, right? Well, I mean, we can all agree that restoring the temple of God is a good thing, right? I mean, like, even from Joash's point of view, it's like, well, we want the house of God to be in array, to be arrayed finely and to be beautiful and all that stuff. But this righteous priest, he didn't do that. It was this king who kind of, and in fact, after he says for it to be done once and it didn't happen, he pushes the envelope. And once again, you have a call and almost a forcing of all these people to come and to do this thing. It almost has that same hint of flavoring, I think.
I don't know, but, verses 12 and 13 said that they were hired. They hired masons.
Well, that's certainly better than, I mean, they were hired to build, but they weren't hired to come bring their crap. They were told to do that.
Yeah. But I think it's important that you have the Levites taking care of David's house and David's house taking care of the Levites and God's house, right?
Sure. I think that hint of flavoring is meant to be in the background, though, because what it's going to do is it's going to tell you, like, while things seem good, it's still a king. And it's still going to have this.
Still a man.
It's still going to have this nasty taste left in your mouth.
Yeah, and we definitely see that. After this positive note, 12, 13, and 14, there's hired laborers instead of slave ones, and everything is being restored. The text specifically says to its proper condition in the house of the Lord. In verse 15, it says, Jehoiada grew old and full of days and died. He was 130 years old at his death, not the only one to hit that mark, and be told that he was old and full of days from the house of Levi. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel and towards God and his house. Now after the death of Jehoiada, the princes of Judah came and paid homage to the king, and the king listened to them. And they abandoned the house of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols. And the wrath came on Judah and Jerusalem for the guilt of theirs. Yet he sent prophets among them to bring them back to the Lord. These testified against him, but they would not pay attention.
Kind of just used to this at this point.
Yeah.
Just used to it.
Well, it's that note, like that while we had a king that was doing good, we noted from the beginning that when the good started to happen, he was too young to do it. The person who was pushing this thing was the priest.
Yeah.
He was the strong leader in Israel that was pointing people towards God. And Joash only did well because he was being pushed to do so. But with this priest, I think that it's a really cool deal that he lives to be 130 years old, because we're not reading where that's been happening for a while. There's been a good little bit since somebody has been said to have been old and full of days. I mean, we've had about 5 kings, or, of both, Israel and Judah, where it says that God struck them down, they died of this, that, and the other, or war, one way or another. He got rid of them because they didn't do good. But here you finally have a leader and a priest. It's like, yeah, but maybe even the first one since David, really, or Solomon. But it says he's old and full of days, and he did well.
This is Creek with At the Table podcast. If you're enjoying the show, give us a rating, review, and share our podcast with a friend. If you'd like to contact us, email us at atthetablepodcastmail@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Now, let's get back into the show.
You're a wretch.
For those in our audience, as we pick up into this break, out of this break, you might wonder, why is John laughing? It's because Trey accused him of drinking frou-frou right beforehand.
Yeah, there's been some behind the scenes jesting at John's expense.
Yeah, at John's expense. I think that John is the king that was
good at first.
Don't say it.
Yeah, he was doing real well, and then...
What does that say of you, though? Like, if you're electing me to do that?
I'm old and full of days. Dog, I can't lead you forever.
Where were we?
This guy. Well, where we were is a good Levite, a good priest. The first really, really, really good one that has been highlighted like this in a long time. I don't think it's an accident that Moses hits 120 years when he dies. Aaron, according to the book of Numbers, hits 123. And then this guy dies old and full of years at 130. And it specifically says the same thing, right? At a good old age. And we've had the tax of Moses imposed, everything in place to sound like a new beginning. And here, after he dies, and they return to idolatry. The princes of Judah persuade Joash to return the nation to idolatry. Zechariah, Joiada's son, comes with the Spirit of God clothed on him, which kind of almost takes us back to some of what would happen in the book of Judges, right?
Yeah.
The Spirit of God would come on someone and they would...
And you were saying that usually they don't have good sons? This is a good son.
Really good guy. Yeah. Really good guy. And...
Sure, he'll be long and full of days, too.
Not so. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. And he prophesies against them. He says, quote, "Why do you break the commandments of the Lord so that you cannot prosper? Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you."
Ruh-roh.
And like every good people, they listen.
He went from David to Saul real quick.
For real.
Really quick.
He went from, God's going to establish you.
To slaughtering
Let's rebuild the
Levites.
temple. You had that Solomon deal. And then it goes straight into, God's forsaken you.
Yeah, killing Levites.
And now the chosen line of David is a Levite killer. And not just that, but they stone him in the court of God's house.
You did to Zechariah, the son of this faithful priest, what you would not even do to Attila or whatever her name was.
Legit.
They carried her out and killed her.
His father, Zechariah's father, made sure that the house of God was a safe place for you. And the priest, that's God's legitimate prophet, and the Spirit of God is on him. This ought to be a safe place for him, if it is anybody.
He got out of fellowship, I guess. That's
Son of a duck.
Gosh, Creek.
But as he is dying, he's being stoned to death, It says he didn't remember the kindness that Jehoiada, his father, had shown him, but killed his son. And as Zechariah was dying, he said, "May the Lord see and avenge."
Dude, that is cold. This isn't like a kind of a hitch forward. This isn't like a Stephen moment where he's like, "Don't hold it to their account." This whole boy's like, "Yeah, judge him."
But imagine, and again, for the listeners, but imagine from the perspective of Zechariah, of all of the people of Judah. For all they knew, when Athaliah was reigning, the dynasty was lost. The Davidic hope has been butchered, literally sought out and butchered by this wicked queen, just like the northern kingdom has. This is a big step in the wrong direction. And then just when things go good, a king's son was found by a faithful priest, taken in the house, raised up, nurtured till he was 7, crowned king, babysat for his whole life, instructed in the ways that was right. Looks at what would be like, honestly, Joash was almost like a son to Jehoiada. There's not too many Levites that are getting buried among the kings.
No.
Right?
I can't think of any.
No. And he's getting buried among the kings. And who are the kings? They are the sons of David.
Yeah.
Right? And he's almost getting like meshed into this line in this way with the text. It's such a good light for him. Joash almost seems like a stepson, and he looks at his brother. When his brother continues the tradition of the one that has saved his life from being butchered as a baby, and he stones him to death for trying to uphold righteousness. If you are expecting a snake crusher to come, and you're looking at Joash and you're Zechariah, and he commands you to be stoned to death for speaking righteousness?
Dude, stoning, like, that's such a good point, because this pagan queen, priestess of Baal, she doesn't get stoned to death. Yeah. She gets slain with the sword and with the spear. Stoning is the punishment for breaking Levitical law.
Right.
Blasphemy.
Specifically for blasphemy. And it's like, he didn't blaspheme. Wow. You blasphemed. You should have been stoned in the temple if anybody was getting stoned.
That's good.
Not him.
That's good.
And he says, like, his charge is, may God see this and avenge. Like, may God see how you have been preserved and cared for by me and my house. And you've decided to repay that kindness with death.
Well, it turns out he was a son of a prophet, because it doesn't take very long.
No,
it takes like almost no time. And it says, at the end of the year, the same fiscal year, at the end of the year, a host comes up from Syria.
That's why they said fiscal. We're in accounting class.
Dude, for real. You don't even get to file your own extra return, playboy. The host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the princes of the people. Those counselors that were wicked, they're dead. Takes all the spoil from them to the king of Damascus. The army of the Assyrians came with a small company of men, and the Lord delivered a very great host into their hand, because they had forsaken the Lord God of their fathers. And so they executed judgment against Joash. And when they were departed from him, they left him in great diseases. His own servants conspired against him for the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, and slew him in his bed, and he died. And they buried him in the city of David, but they did not bury him in the sepulchre of the kings. Because, or it says, and these are they that conspired against him. So I find that interesting that you pointed out.
Ammonite and a Moabite and the Syrians. And you said something about Solomon. I just want to plug that real quick, because what does God tell David about his son? When he does well, I'll be with him, I'll prosper him. But what happens when he doesn't?
Yeah,
I will strike him with the blows of the rods of the kings of men, right, and of men. And what do we have? We have the 3 other rival nations have come to execute judgment on this guy. Like, crazy. And not just 3 rival nations, but 3 rival nations that used to pay tribute to Judah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they used to lick the boot. And these guys are coming to knock you.
It's probably the saddest king for me. Like,
well, there was opportunity.
Dang, you grew up in the temple, bro. Like,
you had all the opportunity.
Priests raised you. You can just imagine this cute little kid. He's 7 years old, being defended by the priests, and then he grows up and kills the priests. Like, what?
He should have been Samuel, right? You should have been dedicated all your days to the Lord.
Well, and the all of these oracles against him, it says. But in the story of how, like, he repairs the house of God and are also recorded in the book of the Kings. And the Kings narrative is not, let's say,
Kind?
no, they don't do any favors for the Davidic line. Let's say that. They take a more critical view of the Davidic line. They're less likely to play the Judah's advocate, so to speak.
The devil's advocate.
And, I don't know, for listeners out here, whether you're the, typical JDEP authorship kind of thing, but anyhow.
You just confused him.
Yeah. Anyway, so Amaziah, his son, reigns in his place. Hopefully he's better. So in chapter 25, I like how it points out that his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. Cool.
Yeah, so she's a Jew.
Yeah, we like that. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart. And as soon as the royal power was firmly his, he killed his servants who had struck down the king his father. Yeah. So these guys that executed righteous judgment, as soon as he had full power, he switches. Snake crusher potential to snake.
I don't see this switch yet. I know that it says he doesn't do right with a whole heart, but I think they should have died. Just because God uses you in his desire to judge doesn't mean that bodes well for you. Look at every nation that God ever used to judge his people. You think you're getting the backhand too. Don't take joy in what he's using you for, because you're a vessel for destruction.
That's true.
I'll rock with you on that one.
And these rods that are of the kings that are striking his Davidic line, it's still his Davidic line.
Right.
And he promised David, I'm going to favor your sons forever.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think
David wouldn't lay his hand on the Lord's anointed, so I guess maybe that's what you're getting at. Anyway.
Right. Well, and it does say the very next thing is he didn't put their kids to death according to what was written in the law of Moses.
Which is good.
Right? So he obeys the law. That's good. So the very next story talks about Amaziah assembling the men of Judah, setting them by fathers' houses under commanders of thousands, hundreds for Judah and Benjamin. So he's mustering an army. He mustered those 20 years and upward and found that they were 300,000 choice men fit for war, able to handle the spear and the shield. He hired also 100,000 men of valor from Israel for 100 talents of silver. But a man of God came to him and said, O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, with all these Ephraimites. Very interesting way to put that, right? Yeah. Because Samaria is in Ephraim, right? Ephraim is the capital of the northern kingdom. This that is to be the fullness of the nations, if we hearken back to Genesis. But also, you haven't had a legitimate king since Solomon.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, well, Rehoboam, but they split underneath him. There hasn't been a Davidic son sitting on your throne for
a while,
decades now, probably more than 100 years. But a man of God comes to him and says that, he's like, hey, don't take these guys. Don't take these Ephraimites. The Lord is not with Israel. No way. But go and act and be strong for the battle. Why should you suppose that God will cast you down before the enemy? Funny, why would you think that? For God has the power to help or to cast down. And Amaziah said to the man of God, but what about the money?
Oh, they already paid him.
I gave him 100 talents of silver. What about the money? No, that's a lot of money.
Hey, I resonate with this dude. I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm going to obey. But can I get a refund?
This guy. So the man of God answered him, and he's like, yo, the Lord's able to give you a lot more than that. So
to be clear, are you saying he's going to give me a lot more than that?
I said he's able.
That's what I'm saying. For this man of God, I'm like, okay. Yes, I'm down, but I need a little bit of clarification.
Well, let's just be real. So the last time Judah went out and thought numbers were going to get him good, what happened? A much smaller army completely annihilated them and wounded the king, and then he got killed by 2 conspirators from rival nations. So I think for Amos, he's got a lot of good reason to just go ahead and go with the man of God and say, you know what? You're right. This was foolish from the get-go. I'm going to run that one back. I'm going to walk that back. We're going to do something.
Maybe it's just me. I just said, hey, so you're saying he will, right? He's going to give me more.
This guy.
No. Okay.
Let's just see what happens, So then Amaziah, he listens. He discharged the army that had come from Ephraim and told him, like, yo, go home.
That army kind of got it good. Like, they're like, okay, 100 talents, and we ain't even do
Yeah, but dude, they're not happy.
Yeah, they're PO'd.
They're PO'd because it's like, okay, so why are you sending us home, dude?
You have a good point, though. Like, why are you mad? There's not even a chance
that's
that you're
a good
gonna,
deal in my book.
Yeah, you're not going to die. There's no chance of you dying.
I think it's probably
You're going back home.
I could just see them like standing in close proximity, and the prophet of God's like, yeah, God's not with them. Send them home. They're like, what? Why?
But Amaziah does the right thing.
But we're on your team. So, no, you're not. Go home.
And then he looks at him. He's like, can't use you. Don't need you.
Yeah.
What do you
Those
mean you don't
Gentile
need me?
dogs.
But it just shows you. It just shows you like the pride, though. Like
Ephraimites.
you would rather go for the chance to die rather than take your money and go home.
Well, they're just one of them ites, man.
Yeah, for real.
You're an Ephraimite.
Ephraimite, yeah.
Get out of here.
I guess that's hardcore. But, okay, so then Amaziah discharged the army, and they become very angry with Judah and returned home in fierce anger. So the text is going to leave us off with them ticked, absolutely ticked. Amaziah took courage and led out his people and went into the valley of Salt and struck down 10,000 men of Seir. The men of Judah captured another 10,000 alive, took them to the top of a rock and threw them down, and they were dashed to pieces. That's kind of hardcore. But the men of the army whom Amaziah...
kind of hardcore.
Check this out. But the men of the army whom Amaziah sent back, not letting them go with them to battle, raided the cities of Judah from Samaria to Beth-horon and struck down 3,000 people in them.
Hold up. I know we just went past it, but I got to go back. You're telling me that 10,000 left alive, the children of Judah carried them up on top of a tall rock and yeeted them off? What?
Why do you have to say yeeted them off?
He just yeeted them off, dude. He said, "Long live the king."
For the audience, this is what me and Trey do to each other on Fortnite. If Trey gets knocked, carry him to the top of the highest peak.
Cast him off the high place.
Like Gandalf and the Balrog. I yeet him off.
Dude, this is going down as, I'm marking this and I'm highlighting this. Oh, you're telling me, because when I write my own Bible, my own version.
Whoa.
When I translate my own version of the Bible.
No.
You write your own Bible.
You're going to hot take that one?
We're getting canceled now.
When I translate my own version of the Bible, I'm putting that 10,000 left alive, the children of Judah carried them up and yeeted them off the rock. They were broken to pieces.
I can't stand this.
Trey
man.
Revised Standard Version.
Trey Revised Heresy Version.
Dog. You're going to get yeeted off in a minute.
I'm just joking.
Taking you up to the rock.
Man. So they get raided by the guys from Ephraim. They're not happy. But it's, again, for the northern kingdom, it's continuing to show depravity. You're killing your own kin for nothing. Right. And when Amaziah comes home from killing these Edomites after being told, like, yo, don't hire Israel, you don't need them. The God of Israel will be with you, right? Not northern Israel, but you, Israel, right? He'll be with you. He brought the gods and the men of Seir back and set them up as his gods and worshiped them.
So I got a question.
Come on.
Why?
For real.
Well, I mean, from his... Yeah.
Why?
from a practical standpoint, I'm looking at this and like, okay,
bro,
if your gods are in charge of keeping you safe, and I just yeeted 10,000 of your people off the high place, what use are your gods to me?
Man.
And this is one thing where I have to just wonder if maybe we've lost the supernatural perspective that is in Scripture, innate in there, and that we've lost it. What was being displayed by these false gods, these lowercase g gods that made him want to turn away from the God that just enabled him to yeet 10,000 of his captives off the high place? What was he seeing in these gods that made him want to take him home, set him up, and bow before him? You're not going to convince me he's stupid enough to see a piece of rock and think, you know what? I really like that. I'm going to take that home and set it up on my fireplace, and I'm going to bow down and worship it. I just have a hard time seeing that. I think that there had to have been something else going on here. It's neither here nor there, but I just think that it's interesting because you're seeing the mighty hand of Yahweh, and you bow before a rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fire.
It doesn't make sense. And the crazy thing is whenever a prophet is sent to him, you know, he says like, yo, why have you sought the gods of a people who did not deliver their
Exactly
own
what I
people from
said.
your hand?
You eated them off, dog. Their gods watched.
This guy. But it says, as he was speaking, the king said, have we made you a royal counselor? Stop. Why should you be struck down? And another king threatens the life of a prophet. And he's like, yo, shut up. Have we made you, you listened before you went to go fight.
The old boy just goes Micah on him.
He's like, hey, you're going to lose if you do that. Okay. And he sends him home, and then he comes back and he's like, shut up or I'll kill you.
I think it's funny, though, because the next thing he says is, yeah, I know that God's determined to destroy you.
Yeah.
You've done this, and you've not hearkened to my counsel, so you're going to die.
Man, the prophets of God are G's. They fear not.
I don't care if you're a false prophet or not. If you ever come to me and say God's determined to destroy you, I'm going to hit my knees. I'm going to say, God, listen, we just got to check up here. Is there any truth to this at all? You know, I'm going to be double checking. Like, I don't understand the pride in the heart of a king that's like, yeah.
Well, what's funny?
Shut up or you're going to die.
What's funny is he does something stupid, and you just see the hubris. Like he's got his own gravitational pull with it,
dude.
He's just sucking all of the hubris into himself.
The son of his father, the devil.
That's awful. So he sends to the king of Israel, and he says, "Hey, let's look one another in the face." And you may be like, if you're a listener, you think, okay, that's weird, but what is that? Can look each other in the face. This is like an old school way of saying, let's throw hands. Want to catch this fade? Want me to knock you in the mouth? Let's see how tough you are. So Joash, the king of Israel, funny that name, sends word to Amaziah and says,
dude, the other king is a cold piece too. Yeah, he says, thou sayest, lo, you have smitten the Edomites, and you've let your heart lift up to thee to boast. Why don't you just stay at home? Why should you meddle in something that's going to lead you to hurt?
Yeah.
Do you want to fall, even you, and Judah with you? This is like old school, Old Testament, like smack talk. He said, why don't we look each other in the face? He's like,
what's funny is he's like, a thistle in Lebanon said to the cedar, he's calling you, he's like, okay, little man, pipe down. You killed 10,000 men from Seir, and then you yeeted the other 10,000 off the cliff. And you think you're hot sauce, but you're not. And what's funny is this whole scenario is after you have bowed down to other gods. Had you been faithful to God, you've already been raided by these guys that you hired while you were gone. You know what's crazy? Maybe this is your response to that, but when you go to respond, here's what happens.
Old Joash.
Joash, king of Israel, not the Joash a chapter ago from Judah. This guy from Israel, the northern kingdom, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, son of Joash, son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh, and brought him to Jerusalem. So he brings him back to his city. He breaks down the wall of Jerusalem for 400 cubits, from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, takes all of the gold and silver, all of the vessels that were found in the house of God in the care of Obed-Edom. He seizes the treasuries of the king's house and hostages and returns to Samaria. This northern king of Israel, your kin, that really should be not only under your rulership, but under the rulership of God, has become another nation.
Man,
they have done the things that rival nations do. So Amaziah lives 15 years after the death of the king of Israel.
I wonder if it's almost reminiscent. Like, well, I guess the Lord is with Israel.
Well, and what's crazy is like The verse 27 of this chapter says, from the time when he turned away from the Lord, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But after Lachish. But after they sent for him to Lachish, they put him to death there. They brought him on horses, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of David. So, like, even the guys in Jerusalem don't want this dude. You know, like,
send your thistle back to Lebanon.
Give us our thistle back so we can kill him. Yeah. You know, crazy, man.
Lachish.
In the next chapter, they take his son Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and make him king instead of his father.
Let's exalt the child.
Right.
Again.
Yeah. Sounds good. But he built Eloth. He restored it to Judah. Okay, that's cool. After the king slept with his fathers, Uzziah was 16 years old when he began to reign. That's older than 7. That's good. 7-year-old didn't do so hot, at least in the latter years of his life, when he began to reign. And he reigned for 52 years in Jerusalem. That's a long time. Yeah, a lot better than the previous reign of his father.
Right.
His mother's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem. Okay. Son of David, ruling in Jerusalem, 52 years. That's not forever, so that's already maybe not an awesome sign, but time will tell. His mother's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of
the Lord. Am I the only one that's triggered by verse 4? Every time it says, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, like, I just get triggered because I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop and for it not to be good.
Right. But it's good. You know, the verse 5 is really what will trigger you at the end. Starts out good. He set himself to seek God in the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of the Lord. We've been needing some fear of God for a while.
Facts.
And as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. As long as he sought the Lord.
This isn't the Zechariah that was stoned to death between
This is 2 generations later. Yeah, couldn't be. So he went out and made war against the Philistines and broke through the wall of Gath. Yo.
Hey, this is actually good. This is kind of David-esque, right?
Last chapter, he got his wall broke through under his dad's reign. This chapter, he's breaking other walls.
And it's Gath. Goliath.
Uncircumcised Philistines.
This is David-esque. This is...
You will bring breakthrough.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I could.
This is almost like, though, like that... What's the word? The formula, right? It's the formula. You're not just being anointed king, but you're going and you're gonna go kill a giant, or at least a Philistine from Gath. That's David-esque. It's kind of
sounds cool.
Yeah.
And the wall of Ashdod. So 2 of their 5, sort of city states that they have. He builds cities in their territory and elsewhere among the Philistines. So he's conquering. He's taking land.
And once again, in verse 8, the Ammonites gave tribute to Uzziah.
That's right. Moreover, and who conspired against his grandfather, an Ammonite and a Moabite. Right?
They're licking the boot again.
Well, and his fame even spreads to Egypt, so he's doing good.
They get yo-yoed a lot, old Ammonites. They go from the top of... It's so funny, too, because their destiny is not even in their hands. Like, you're going to be on the bottom or the top just based on how Judah does. If they do good, then, like, you're going to be licking the boot. And if they don't, then you get these little respites, and then you're going right back to licking the boot.
Well, and part of this chapter, like, shows, like, Uzziah really strengthening Jerusalem, and you would think it was awesome. He sets up this army. He prepares for all of the army, shields, spears, helmets, coats of mails, bones, stones for slinging, and made war machines. Sets them on the towers of Jerusalem. It's almost like he's like, yo, this city ain't never getting busted
It's fortified
into again.
At this point.
Yeah. So his fame spreads far, and he was marvelously helped until he was strong. Verse 16. But when he was strong, he grew proud to his destruction. For he was unfaithful to the Lord his God, and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Big no-no.
So this brings up a good point. 2 points, really. The first point that I want to bring up is, like, there seems to be these moments that David, when he's in obeisance to God, he can do things that shouldn't be done. Or at least that it seemingly seems taboo, like eating the showbread, right? But his heart is right before God.
Right.
This here, right before he does this thing, it says that, and his heart was lifted up to his destruction. So pride has had his work in old Uzziah. And so the motive isn't good in what he's doing here. But he goes in and he offers up this incense to the Lord. And this second point that I want to bring up is like, you can be faithful to Yahweh in loyalty, but be disobedient to your destruction.
Sure.
He's not worshiping another god. Well, maybe himself, you could argue. But he comes into Yahweh's temple to burn incense to Yahweh, which we would say like, oh, well, I mean, he's worshiping God, right? But he's not being obedient to the way that God wants to be worshipped.
Right.
And have we not read before that obedience is better than sacrifice?
Yes.
Leave your incense outside.
Yeah.
Just do right. Do what I told you.
It's that usurping of authority. But, I think that's why, like, thank God for the Spirit of God. Like, if the king has the Spirit of God, I'm not saying he won't sin, obviously, but it seems like the Spirit of God is what keeps these kings from getting like that, getting to be super prideful, super arrogant, to go try to just burn incense to the Lord whenever they please. You know what I mean?
And just a tail end on your point. Like, I mean, you were instructed in the fear of God. Did you not read in the law of Moses the penalty for this?
Dude.
Like
right.
the qualifications for who can come in to do this and who can't?
Man.
You're not a Levite. And like Trey said, but it highlights, and God, I want to be careful. But it highlights, it's not just that you're not a Levite, like Trey said, but you're proud.
Yeah.
Your heart is not postured to the God you're going to burn incense to in the proper way, right? Yep. And what does God say? If you humble yourself, I'll exalt you. If you exalt yourself, I will humble you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens to this king.
When David dances before the ark of the Lord until his clothes fall off, his heart was humble, to honor God, and God honored him.
Yeah.
There seems to be several things that David does where it's like, why that doesn't seem fitting, for a king. That's not what a king does. But because his heart is to worship God in spirit and truth, he gets elevated.
Or taking the ephod from the priest,
It's like, what?
And inquiring of God, it's not your gig.
But that's that reminiscence. So it's like you said, your heart is in the right place. And so, God's going to honor that. But for Uzziah, what seemed good on the outside didn't matter.
And the big flag here is his heart. But there's something to be said about David, who is almost like this prototype of the Messiah. And, he can do that,
Yeah.
He can ask and inquire of God.
I think that's why he can do that, though, is because the Messiah that we're expecting, his heart will be after Yahweh. It isn't going to be built up in himself. Right. And God does something to Uzziah that is, I think, a cold piece. He makes the outside of him match the inside of him.
Yeah.
He strikes him with leprosy. And he's struck with leprosy, and they cast him out of the house of the Lord, and he never gets to go back.
He's no longer a whitewashed
He's
tomb.
unclean. Dude, straight up. I mean,
he's a tomb dirty on
he's
inside
unclean.
Inside. Yeah.
You are now unclean, and you can't be cleansed.
Yeah.
And the rest of his days, he lives a leper.
So we've got, 3 more disqualified kings. And the chapter's end is telling us that his son is over his house governing the land while he has leprosy. Uzziah and all of his acts from first to last, Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, wrote. In the coming episodes, we're going to hear a lot about him. And Uzziah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the burial field that belongs to the king, for they said, he is a leper. So not in the sepulchre, but in the fields. And Jotham, his son, reigns in his place. Wrapping this up, we don't really hear a lot about Jotham, especially from the Chronicles narrative that seems to give us more about the Davidic line than what the king does. We hear that he's 25 years old when he begins to reign, that he only reigns for 16 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jerushah, the daughter of Zadok.
That's kind of cool.
That's sick. I love that name. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all his father Uzziah had done, except he didn't enter the temple of the Lord. Good thing.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
And it says that
At least not to burn incense.
the Ammonites bring him tribute.
Yeah. So he builds the upper gate of the house of the Lord. He does a lot of building on the wall of Ophel. He builds cities in the hill country of Judah, forts and towers, just like his dad did. He fought with the king of the Ammonites, prevailed against them. The Ammonites gave him that year 100 talents of silver.
It says, so Jotham became mighty because he prepared his ways before the Lord his God.
Now the rest of the acts of Jotham and all his wars and ways, behold, they are written in the books of the kings of Israel and Judah. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. He slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Ahaz his son reigned in his place. So there's not a ton to go off of with Jotham. There doesn't really seem to be any rebellion. But the narrative here bookends him as, I don't want to say inconsequential, but it certainly does not cast him as a fulfilled snake crusher.
Almost
This is the guy.
anticlimactic, like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, but at least he does good.
Yeah.
right,
He's he is what he is.
Right.
sure.
When it comes time to strike the Ammonites,
We'd rather have Jotham than Amaziah
no doubt.
and Athaliah and Joash.
Yeah.
All of those three sucked.
Yeah.
So we're glad to have him.
Right.
And the good news is, for the continuation of our search, that sons of David are still in succession on the throne of Jerusalem, just as Yahweh has promised. And that brings back to mind, something I think on the Bible Project that Tim Mackey pointed out so good. He was talking, just on the landing of this plane about how Jacob and Esau, from Isaac, how the Abrahamic blessing is passed from Abraham to Isaac and then from Isaac to Jacob. And how this blessing of the seed, and really primarily what we're talking about, Genesis 3:15, the snake crusher, what we are looking for, the Messiah, that he's to come from Jacob. This beautiful promise, and I love how he says it. It's like with Jacob, it's almost like watching a toddler walk down a busy street next to a drain pipe with a precious jewel, fumbling and stumbling everywhere. And God has promised to protect this jewel, to preserve it, and to bless all of the nations from it. And you see it being handled by something that is so flimsy, by something that seems to be so unsturdy. And yet the thing that we have to trust in as we continue to read through the Chronicles and the Kings and all of the prophets and all of the priests that God uses is that what Trey pointed out earlier, that God is faithful to protect his promise. Just as, Jehoiada and his fellow priests were safeguarding Joash as a young boy. Even more so, God is safeguarding his promise, and the line of David continues on. So we continue our search.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, I think for our purposes today, that's pretty much what's at the table. So unless you guys got something else to add.
Man, congratulations again to our winners of our contest.
Yes.
Thank you guys for staying in, staying plugged in, and I guess Godspeed.
Yeah, be blessed.
Catch you later. Thank you for joining us for another episode of At the Table Podcast. We hope it blessed you and taught you something. And if you enjoyed, leave us a good rating and like us on Facebook. And from all three of us, until next time, thank you and God bless.